and gentlemen, boys and girls, everybody around the world. Welcome back to another video. Today, yes, I look a little crubby, a little fugly, a little musty, if you will. But today we're back at it with scary videos, and this isn't quite frankly a scary video, but well, I don't know if it's scary or not yet, but it is one of the strangest cases you'll ever hear. So we could put in the category of weird to scary categorization of where this video will be. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed, like, subscribe, and let's see this weird case that he's supposedly saying about.
This case takes place in the USA in the year 2010. Greg Flanagan was found dead in a locked hotel room in Texas. The door was locked from the inside.
Ooh, okay. Texas. Oh no. Oh fuck. Okay, we might be a little cooked.
And nothing in the room was disturbed. At first glance, it looked like he had died quietly of natural causes. There were no wounds, no blood, and no obvious signs of foul play on his body. Police and paramedics initially assumed that the man had suffered a heart attack, but an autopsy later revealed catastrophic internal injuries that any natural death could not explain. Greg was a 55-year-old man from Louisiana. He worked as a landman, securing mineral rights for drilling, and co-owned a successful leasing company with his brother. He was a familiar face in Beaumont, Texas, where his company's operations often took him during the week. Every Monday, he drove west on Interstate 10 from Louisiana to Beaumont for work, and every Friday, he drove back home. Greg was known as a creature of habit and a professional. He kept a tidy routine when living out of his hotel.
Excuse me. Okay, I'm gonna need the subtitles. Did he just say... Oh, okay, creature of habit. I thought he said, like, havoc. Like, he's fucking crazy. But he's a professional. I was about to be like, whoa, what the hell? Okay, that's my bad.
Every Friday, he drove back home. Greg was known as a creature of habit and a professional. He kept a tidy routine when living out of his hotel rooms on business trips. After a long day, he had a specific way of unwinding each night in his room. He liked to crank up the aircon and settle in with some snacks and television. His co-workers said that he rarely went out to bars or socialized when he was on the road. Instead, he preferred quiet evenings by himself, watching movies or sports in his room. By all accounts, Greg was well liked and was respected by those who knew him. He had a reputation for generosity and kindness amongst his friends and colleagues. One childhood friend said that Greg would literally give someone the shirt off his back if they needed it. Despite his success, Greg remained humble and down to earth. He was close with his family and deeply in love with his wife, Susie. No one who knew Greg could imagine that he had any enemies or any reason to fear for his safety. On Wednesday the 15th of September 2010, Greg was on one of his routine work trips and was staying at the MCM Elegant Hotel in Beaumont. He had checked into room 348. That evening, Greg followed his usual pattern to relax after work. Around 7 p.m, he exchanged messages with Susie, and then gave her a phone call as he did every night to say goodnight from Texas. After hanging up, Greg changed into his comfortable pajamas and settled in for a quiet night. He had the aircon unit turned up to keep the room cool, and to complete his nightly ritual, he laid out a small hand towel on the bed to serve as a makeshift tray. On the towel, he arranged his ashtray, pack of cigarettes, a lighter, the TV remote, his mobile phone, and some chocolate. But Greg also wanted some popcorn. At some point, he popped a bag of microwave popcorn in the room's microwave for a snack. However, this is an important point. The microwave tripped the room's circuit breaker and caused a brief power outage in that section of the hotel, including next door. Greg then called the front desk to report the power outage, admitting that it was likely his popcorn that blew the fuse. A maintenance worker then came up to the floor to reset the breaker.
What? That's a shitty ass hotel then. If the whole ass fucking thing is blowing up just for microwaving a fucking popcorn. Yo, this is a sketchy ass hotel, but I'm gonna keep hearing it out, alright?
A maintenance worker then came up to the floor to reset the breaker and restored power to the rooms. Greg apologized to the maintenance man for the inconvenience, and the lights and the TV came back on in room 348. The guests in the adjacent room, 349, also got their power back after a short interruption. Once this minor incident was resolved, nothing else seemed out of the ordinary that night. Greg returned to his bed and continued watching his movie. In the room on the other side of his wall, room 349, a group of out-of-town workers had gathered to drink and watch sports on TV. According to their own accounts later, they were just drinking and relaxing. They did not interact with Greg at all. As far as anyone knew, there were no confrontations or disturbances that night on the floor. By all appearances, Greg was safe inside his locked hotel room, enjoying a quiet evening alone.
Okay.
But the next morning, Greg failed to show up at the office where he was expected to be. This immediately alarmed his co-workers because Greg was known for his reliability and his routine morning phone calls. Also, Susie had not received her usual morning call from Greg either, which added to the concern.
Ooh.
Colleagues tried to call him, but Greg didn't pick up the phone. So instead, they decided to drive to the hotel themselves and check up on him. They arrived at room 348 and knocked on the door repeatedly, but there was no answer. And here's the chilling part. The door was locked from the inside, latched by the security chain. Worried, the co-workers asked the hotel inside, latched by the security chain. Worried, the co-workers asked the hotel staff for some help. A manager then used a master key to unlock the door, and had to force the interior chain to get inside. That's when they found Greg. When they finally entered, they found Greg's lifeless body on the floor. He was face down in the carpet with his pajamas on. The room was stuffy and warm, as the air conditioner had at some point been turned off. Greg's skin had turned a greyish-blue colour by the time he was found. There was also a damp stain around the crotch area of his pajamas, which sometimes happens when a person dies suddenly.
Yeah.
He also had a cigarette still between his fingers, which had burned down to the stub. Other than this, nothing looked obviously wrong. The room was undisturbed. Nothing was broken or ransacked. His wallet was found in his jeans, with over $1,000 in cash still inside. His watch and personal belongings were...
Oh, no one robbed him. All his shit is on him.
All present and all untouched. The door had been locked from the inside, and no one had heard any commotion. To the police officers and paramedics on the scene, it seemed like this may have been a tragic natural death. However, they were wrong. A veteran Beaumont police detective named Scott Apple arrived to investigate. The detective initially saw nothing to indicate any foul play, and he suspected that Greg may have died of a heart attack or a stroke. He even told some guests of the neighbouring rooms that it looked like a natural causes death. Still, as is standard procedure, an autopsy was ordered to find the official cause of death. Greg's body was transported to a medical office for a post-mortem examination later that day. At first, the external examination of the body didn't reveal too much. That was until the doctor found something truly puzzling. A small half-inch laceration on Greg's scrotum. The scrotal area was swollen and discoloured with a bit of fluid around the cut. There was also bruising that extended through the groin and across the hip. It appeared that Greg had been struck extremely hard in the groin by something. The doctor continued the autopsy and then discovered...
Don't tell me he died by getting hit in the balls too hard. No. What?
A series of internal injuries that left him stunned. When he opened the torso, he found a significant amount of internal bleeding in the abdominal cavity.
Internal?
Parts of Greg's intestines were torn, and there were small lacerations on the stomach and the liver. 2 of his ribs were broken, and he...
Okay. You know how hard... even as an old person, you know how hard it is to break a fucking rib? I mean, okay, he was 58, alright? Or 50 some, I don't know, I forgot. If he fell off his bed, I don't think you could break a rib. Okay, look at this shit, bro. I'm a 5'10" person, alright? If the bed is this tall, alright, bro, hold on. If the bed is this tall, okay, I'm 5'10", alright? I am 5'10". You are not. This is at least the size of my arm, size of my whole arm. That's at least like a 2-3 feeder. 2-3 feeder. I don't think you're dying from that.
And the liver. 2 of his ribs were broken, and he had a hole in his heart. The damage...
Can't you get a hole in your heart by like smoking or like drinking too much? Doesn't that happen? I don't know.
Inside Greg's body looked more like what the doctor would expect from a serious car accident or someone being crushed by heavy machinery. Yet, Greg's body had no external trauma. Well, other than the cut on the scrotum. In the doctor's opinion, there was no way that these injuries could have happened on their own.
Yeah.
He ruled the death a homicide caused by blunt force trauma of unknown origin. These findings caught everyone by surprise because the scene had nothing to indicate a violent attack. The detective called the doctor as soon as he heard the autopsy results, asking for some kind of explanation. The doctor told him that Greg's internal damage was as severe as anything he'd seen in high-impact deaths, and clearly not natural. And with this, the case turned into an official murder investigation. However, the police had no immediate suspects and no clear idea what had killed Greg inside a locked room.
Okay, they said it themselves. The room was locked. Keychain on. What room? He was in 300 something. So that has to be like up here. So if there was a murderer, he can't just jump off the damn window. I mean, can you go through? Is there a door in the hotel next to the guests, like next to the other room? Because there's sometimes hotels, I think. Because I know for sure that they have them in motels. But because I know there's some in hotels. But some hotels have it where there's I think it's hotels too. I don't know. I know it's for sure motels, but I don't know about hotels. But hotels, motels, they sometimes have a door in the middle, like just right there, and then the 2 rooms. And then there's just I think the only people that could open that door is like the what's it called, the workers, or like the cleaning crew, the maids, because I guess like it moves faster. But if that is the case, then that might be one clue right there.
For months, the mystery would only deepen as investigators struggled.
Oh, this was in 2010. Oh.
To find a lead. This kind of case was extremely rare in Beaumont, a city that saw usual straightforward homicides with clear motives. Now, Detective Apple had a victim with horrific internal injuries, with no witnesses, no suspects, and a completely clean crime scene. He methodically began piecing together Greg's final day, and...
Why does he look like Dexter Morgan's dad, bro? Harry Morgan over here, bro.
...to interview anyone who might have any information. In the days after the autopsy, the police looked into every possible angle, no matter how unlikely. They spoke with Greg's colleagues and friends, but they found no enemies or conflicts in Greg's life. They even looked into the maintenance worker who sought out the power cut, as he did have a criminal past. However, this lead went nowhere. Another theory focused on the group of people who were staying in room 349, the door next to Greg's. The detective learned about the popcorn and power outage incident, and he wondered if this could have caused some kind of unpleasant exchange or an argument between the 2 rooms. He considered whether this could have turned into a physical altercation in the hallway, and that Greg could have been beaten badly and then gone back into his hotel room and collapsed, hence why the door was locked. It was a bit of a stretch, but the detective pursued it. He questioned the...
Wait, that's actually... Damn, I didn't even think of that. What if he was fighting, and after the fight, they all just like, fuck this, we're gonna go back to the room, and he went back in his room, he didn't feel anything, or he probably did, because, you know, and then he collapsed. Oh, yo, that's actually a smart, yo.
The men in room 349 multiple times, but they all insisted that they had seen and heard nothing unusual. And by early 2011, the case was no closer to being solved. However, Grigg's widow Susie grew increasingly frustrated as the months went by with no answers. She refused to let her husband's case slip into obscurity, so she took matters into her own hands. Susie hired a private investigator named Ken. Ken took a fresh look at what had happened to Greg. He was a former police detective and a DEA agent with a reputation for solving tough cold cases.
The wife gonna come in clutch with the private investigator, please.
And he was determined to crack this mystery.
Let's go.
In the spring of 2011, Ken traveled to Beaumont and teamed up with Detective Apple. Together, they reviewed all of the evidence. They walked through room 348, reconstructing the sequence of events the best they could. While scrutinizing the hotel room, Brennan's eye caught something that no one had paid much attention to before. On the wall shared between room 348 and room 349, he spotted a faint imperfection. It was a tiny round indentation in the wall, so small and subtle it was easy to miss unless you were really carefully looking for it. The two then realized that it could be a bullet hole, or at least evidence of one. The small hole in the wall had not been obvious during the initial investigation, perhaps obscured by low light, or just simply accidentally overlooked in a case that first seemed natural. They immediately went next door to room 349 to examine the same wall from the other side, and sure enough, on room 349 they found a corresponding hole. However, the hole had been hastily patched, filled in with some kind of white substance that had since dried. It looked a lot like someone had used toothpaste to plug a small hole in the wall. This was the eureka moment in the investigation. The detective and the private investigator realized that a bullet had likely been fired through the wall into room 348 on the night that Greg died. The trajectory lined up almost exactly where Greg would have been laying. All of the baffling evidence now started to make sense.
So
the penetrating force that killed Greg was a bullet. The small laceration on his scrotum was the entry point where the bullet had pierced his body.
Oh my god! Yo, that's scary. Oh my god, that's scary. Yo!
Because the skin of the scrotum is soft and pliable, the tiny bullet hole actually closed up on its own after his death, making it almost invisible to the coroner at first glance. With the benefit of this insight, Dr. Brown reviewed the autopsy findings again and confirmed that the internal injuries were likely due to a bullet.
Yo! Laying down! Then... Oh my god, that's so fucked. Yo. Who the fuck
The bullet
shot?
had entered through the groin.
Wait, they're in a hotel. Where's the bullet coming from? Who had the gun?
Traveled upward through the abdominal organs, ricocheted off a rib, and torn into his heart. Armed with this new understanding, the investigators turned their full attention to the men who had been in room 349. They now knew that one of these men had likely shot Greg through the wall, probably without ever seeing him. 3 men had been staying in that room that night, and all 3 of them were brought in for formal interviews. These men were identified as Lance Mueller, Trent Pisano, and Tim Steinmetz.
Ooh.
At first, all three stuck to
Ooh.
their original stories.
Until one folded, didn't it? Until one folded, and then another one, and then the other. They're like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. It just happened.
That nothing unusual happened that night. The investigators then decided to add some pressure. They warned the men that lying to the police was a serious offense, and that evidence was mounting that a gun had been fired that night. After some tense discussions, one of the men finally cracked, and he decided to tell the truth. Tim Steinmetz finally admitted that they had not been honest earlier. He confessed that on the night of the 15th of September, they had indeed been drinking in room 3-4.
Alright. What's his name? Tim? Alright. Thank you for telling me the story, but you're still a bitch for, saying, But thank you. Thank you. Tim is a snitch, though. But thank you for being a snitch, because now I get to know this amazing story and how this unfolded. Okay, I'm sorry for talking too much. Let's just see.
Steinmetz finally admitted that they had not been honest earlier. He confessed that on the night of the 15th of September, they had indeed been drinking in room 349, and things had gotten out of hand. According to
Wait, hold on. Okay,
Tim, their co-worker had been showing off a firearm in the hotel room. It turned out that Lance Mueller, one of the other men, had brought with him a 9mm pistol on the trip. The men had finished their work for the day and were relaxing in the room with some beers when Lance decided to do a bit of a show and tell with his new pistol.
What?
Already drunk, Lance began pretending to be a Wild West gunslinger with his 9mm pistol, twirling it around and even aiming it at his friends in jest. The other men shouted at him to stop and
yeah, no shit. And that bitch was loaded too, cause it shot.
To be careful, and in the middle of this horseplay, the gun suddenly went off. A bullet blasted out of the barrel, went through the wall of room 349 and into the adjacent room. In that instant, unbeknownst to any of them, the bullet struck Greg on the other side of the wall. They said they didn't hear a scream or any noise coming from 348.
No shit,
Tim and Trent stood in shock as Lance immediately began to panic at what he had done. In a panic, Lance patched the hole in the wall with toothpaste to hide it and stashed the gun in his truck outside. The next morning, when they saw the police outside room 348 and Greg's body being wheeled out, the men realized that their worst fear had come true. Terrified of the consequences, they agreed there and then to stay silent and to stick to their story. For many months, their lie held up and the crime remained unsolved. But now...
Hey, man. That's... Okay, hold on.
The truth was finally out. With this confession and the physical evidence, detectives finally had cracked the case. In June of 2011, a warrant was issued in Texas for the arrest of Lance on a charge of manslaughter. Police in Wisconsin located their 48-year-old electrician and took him into custody about 9 months after Greg's death. After so much uncertainty, investigators were finally able to give Susie and Greg's family the answers they had been desperately seeking. Lance was a middle-aged electrician from Upper Midwest who had come to Texas for work. At the time of the incident, Lance was 47-year-old, and he had no history of violent behavior in his background. However, Lance did have a history of alcohol problems and poor judgment when drinking. It soon came out that Lance had multiple prior arrests for driving under the influence. On the night of Greg's death, Lance's decision to mix heavy drinking with showing off his gun proved to be a deadly combination.
Really?
However, Lance chose to cover up what he had done instead of coming forward. He disposed of the evidence by hiding his handgun, first in his truck and then later reportedly in a safe belonging to his attorney. He and his co-workers silently agreed not to mention the gunshot to anyone at the hotel. They left Beaumont when their job had ended, hoping the entire incident would be written off as an unexplained death, leaving Greg's family forever wondering what actually happened to him. Lance was reportedly shocked yet relieved when the initial autopsy did not identify a gunshot. He convinced himself that he would never be caught. Even after Tim confessed and the evidence of the bullet was clear, Lance still struggled to accept responsibility. In a recorded phone call that the police arranged between Tim and Lance, Lance expressed disbelief that his shot had actually killed someone, pointing out that the coroner hadn't found a bullet at first. But once the full truth was laid to bear, Lance could no longer hide from the consequences. They showed Lance the report from the second autopsy, where they found the bullet lodged in Greg's chest. After his arrest, Lance was extradited to Texas and booked into Jefferson County Jail to await trial. The trial began on the 25th of September 2012. Lance entered a plea deal of no contest to the manslaughter charge. By pleading no contest, he accepted legal responsibility for Greg's death without admitting deliberate intent. In exchange, the case did not go through a full jury trial, and sentencing was left to the judge. At the sentencing hearing in late October of 2012, members of Greg's family, including Susie, were present to deliver victim impact statements. Susie walked up and addressed Lance face-to-face in the courtroom. She said, "You would have never come forward with the truth. You didn't set out to kill Greg, but you did, with every lie you told and every selfish act to cover it up. You saw his body being taken away in a bag, and you knew you had killed him. You have met your match. I would have spent the rest of my life tracking you down, and I found you." Beyond a brief apology, Lance didn't say much during the trial, so the judge proceeded to sentence Lance to 10 years in prison. The maximum possible sentence was 20 years, meaning that Lance received about half of the time. By law, Lance would have to serve at least 5 years before becoming eligible for parole. When the sentence was announced, observers noticed that Lance appeared to be stunned by the length of time he was given. Susie later remarked that he did look shocked, but as she poignantly put it, not as shocked as Greg must have been in his final moments. Greg's family finally had answers and a measure of justice. Susie returned home after the trial, knowing that she had fulfilled her vow to find her husband's killer. The case has since become a cautionary tale of how a moment of careless behaviour can destroy lives. After serving his sentence, Lance was released in 2022. He had spent roughly a decade behind bars for the killing of Greg. By all indications, Lance returned.
So he's like 50. He's like 57. That boy like 57.
To Wisconsin after his release and has kept a low profile since. For Greg's loved ones, however, the impact of his death will last a lifetime. But they have taken some solace in knowing exactly what happened to Greg, and accountability was ultimately achieved.
Damn. 10 years. I don't know if that's justifiable, but how the hell didn't they hear the gunshot? That's what I want to know. The motherfucker said they didn't hear no noise. Didn't hear a 9mm go off. Didn't hear a bro. Either you have a nightclub like on like the first floor where you just like it's just noise, or like you got some soundproof ass motherfucking walls, because how the hell does a bullet shot you can't hear that? Someone must have heard it, and I don't know, they just didn't say anything. Whew, guys, if you guys enjoyed, like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.